Hello, I'm Congressman Steve Cohen, and this is Congressional Report, a very special Congressional Report. It's about the Tuskegee Airmen, the Red Tails, the movie The Red Tails, but beyond that, the human beings, the Red Tails. Memphis was a city that was proud to be mentioned in the movie and the home of two of the Tuskegee Airmen. Lieutenant Colonel Luke Weathers, Jr., a Memphian who passed away in October and was buried at Arlington Cemetery on the day the movie opened, January 20 of this year, in a moving service. And his family are with us. And on my left is Andre Weathers, a son. Next to him is a historian on the Tuskegee Airmen to share some stories that I don't know about and some history. Stephen Cash, a retired corporal from the United States Army. And Luke Weathers III, another son of Lieutenant Colonel Weathers. And then his daughter will join us in just a few minutes. But first, we're all blessed by your father's time on earth and what he did as a member of our armed forces, having to fight for his country and to successfully get around the Jim Crow laws that existed at the time when African Americans were limited in their abilities to serve their country. Did your dad tell you a lot of stories about when he wanted to become a Tuskegee Airman and what it was like?
Well, you know, he became a Tuskegee Airman before we were born. Right. And the war actually ended, I was born in 1950. And I think the war ended in 1945. He always told us not to exert so much of their accomplishments, that he was a pilot. We didn't know the significance of what he actually had done historically, as a man, as an American, as a Tuskegee Airman itself. He played it down. He never built it up. He never bragged about it. He never boasted about it. It was just something that he did.
You know, I was at the service. The first I really kind of learned of your dad was when it passed, and it was at Little Flower Church, which he helped integrate back in '63 or '60, whatever. And one of the things that came through, Andre, was how humble your father was. And he didn't talk about his exploits. Did he ever talk to you at all about his days as a fighter pilot?
He touched barely, you know. He would tell me periodically different little stories about how he was a fighter. And he just never really, you know, bragged about it or anything, you know, because of what they went through.
Did he have artifacts? Did he have parts of his uniform that he maintained, or any type of memorabilia that he maintained over the years, medals or things that he might have shown and shared with you?
Oh yeah, he had the Congressional Medal of Honor. He has a jacket that they wore, and he had a uniform at one time. I don't know what happened to it.
Do you know what happened to it? You know, brothers sometimes get into those things.
No, but I used to see his bomber jacket in the closet, and he had his headgear that he wore in the cockpit. I remember seeing that, and I remember seeing that the left lens of the goggles that they wore was cracked in half, and I think they were kind of tinted blue, if I'm not mistaken. But we were very young, you know, during that time. Occasionally, over the years, I may have seen one or two medals in his drawer, something like that. But as far as any other memorabilia, we really didn't get a lot from him as far as pictures, news reports, things like that, until we were, what, almost grown? It's when he actually put packages together and gave to all his siblings, to my siblings rather, to his children. Yeah.
Well, at the time, you know, and that's part of the story of the movie, which makes it so great, is that the failure of America, the Jim Crow laws and the discrimination and the prejudice that we had that held our country back, because African Americans have shown in every area that they can compete and even surpass others, whether it be tennis and Arthur Ashe, or golf and Tiger Woods, or coaching and Tony Dungy, or you name it. Any sports act. Jackie Robinson started it, but and Barack Obama is about to finish it.
Yes.
But you know, so we really sacrificed a lot of talent because we didn't give that opportunity. And so the Tuskegee Airmen were. Now, Steve, you're the historian. Were they the first African American pilots or the first African American fighter pilots? What's the distinction here?
They're actually one and the same. They were actually trained as a program that, as you mentioned, come under fire from several different views. The fighter pilots first started off training as a fighter pilot. Then they move on into their role in the service of being the escorts. Before they picked up the bombers, like they mentioned in the movie, of one of them's scoreboard was looking more like the scoreboard of a motor pool, picking up trains, cars, motorcycles, because they weren't really given the opportunity to prove themselves of going up against the Germans and their planes. When you roughly are figuring, this is a replica of Mr. Luke's father's plane. This is a P-51 Mustang that they show in the movie. They went through several different versions. Of course, they had the P-40 Warhawks, they had a P-39 Super Cobra, and they've even hit in areas of P-47 Thunderbolts and P-38s. But when you take this and what they're compared against towards the end of the movie, this is now the replica towards the end of the movie. This is the Messerschmitt 262 twin jet engine plane that at the end of the movie they are actually score 3 kills. They are also, that's the first kills of the German planes. So they're not only accountable for not losing a bomber, but also taking out the first German fighter planes. Some of the other history that goes along with it towards the end that you're talking about with is they were actually going to bring out a bomber squadron. None of the movies has brought this out, and again, due to the bigotry that was going on, I recently found out they were being trained by Mr. Luke Withers' flying group. I haven't found his name directly connected with the 302nd. The Tuskegee Airmen is a group of 4 squadrons. You have the 99th, the 100th, 301st, and 302nd. 302nd is the group that Mr. Luke Withers was in. They were, towards the end of the war, asked to come back and train B-25 Mitchell bomber groups that were going to be strictly black. Most of the information can be dug up online, like I've been doing, to do proper research. One of the articles that come out is on the new movie that these men's names were false, that they were fictitious. I'd like to correct that. It's not. They were working on the set with real Tuskegee men. The names are real. Anything other than treating the names as fictitious is doing a dishonor to all. When people want to do stories, they need to do the proper research. They need to get the story correct. Anything other, people are disgraced.
Well, there was one pilot that mentioned Memphis, and he was from Memphis, they claim, but there were 2 pilots that I know of. Besides Lieutenant Colonel Weathers, there was Linkwood Williams, who was a famous obstetrics gynecology physician here in Memphis and passed away within the last year or 2 as well. To the best of my knowledge, and you tell me if I'm wrong, were they the only 2 Memphis Tuskegee Airmen?
Yes, they were the only 2. One of the other things that I found out that Mr. Luke Withers didn't know about is one of the white bomber pilots, when he returned home, actually had found Mr. Luke Withers, and he was actually given also the key to Mississippi. The article I found stated that Mr. Luke Withers was receiving the key for saving the life of a Dixie man. I hadn't had much time. I went through surgery this Tuesday, so trying to finish up my research has been a little rough.
And the Tuskegee Airmen won, and did your father receive a separate Congressional Gold Medal? The Tuskegee Airmen received a Congressional Gold Medal as a group, and they were all honored in Washington at the Rotunda in a service. I guess each airman got a replica or a medal?
Each one of them got a replica medal, yes. They did.
So where is that replica medal now, Andre? Is that where that missing jacket is?
I think, I'm not pretty sure, either my sister or his ex-wife, or his wife has it.
Right, well, okay, that's a good solution.
The executors of his estate are actually done the inventory of all the Weathers family memorabilia at this time.
Is there going to be a book? Was your dad doing a book?
I understand there is a manuscript that he was working on, not yet completed, and that's something else the executors are handling, so we'll just have to get a word from them on the next step on those.
He shot down, as I understand it, 2 German planes on one particular mission. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And did he shoot down 2 planes total, or were there more planes he shot down, or was that the 2 that he shot on the same mission?
The total was, what, 7, Steve?
Yeah, he, as on his plane, when they gave me the information, he's actually, and in all the documentaries, he's awarded 7 total kills altogether. I'm trying to find the research of exactly what type of planes those were. The one mentioned main article of where the Pentagon was awarding him with a great big painting that had the 2 pictures. What we're trying to find out right now is if the painting is of him escorting a damaged B-24 Liberator back home. What I'm trying to find out is if the artist just done it, or is it that the 2 planes jumped it as he was escorting it home, and that's what he's accounted for, is taking those 2 planes out. But I'm not quite sure as to if that's all correct.
Now, Luke, do you know your father was active in the Tuskegee Airmen's group that afterwards they had an organization? Is that accurate?
Yes.
Did he ever talk to you about the meetings they went to, or were you familiar with his activities as an executive? I guess he was a leader in that group.
The only thing he told me was, I'm off to a meeting, I got to speak. That was the only thing. As far as what they discussed, details like that, the charter groups, he didn't go into a lot of detail. But I do know after he retired from FAA, he was quite active, traveled the country, gave speeches, and supported anything that he possibly could connect with Tuskegee, Afro-Americans in general, particularly those who wanted to go into aviation.
And we know, Andre, that your father, after the war, went into different businesses, and but one of the things he did is he became an employee of the Federal Aviation Administration, and was the first African-American employee, or the first air traffic controller here in Memphis.
Right.
So he broke barriers not only in the 40s during the war, but then in the 60s here in Memphis as barriers continue to fall. And then he was at Anchorage, Alaska, and Atlanta, and maybe D.C. Did you travel with him? Did y'all go to Anchorage or Atlanta, or was that all different?
Well, when he got his position with FAA, his first duty assignment, they sent him to Alaska. We were in Memphis, Tennessee. His first station there was Anchorage. Within a year, they moved him from Anchorage to a little small place in Alaska called Galena, which really constituted in circumference maybe 5 miles in circumference, 1 airstrip, a trailer, 4 hangars where they worked, 3 military bases, I believe. And before that end of the year, the following year is when the family actually moved, and we stayed there I stayed there for a year. My siblings stayed there for 2 years.
And then when did your father move on to Tucson?
Right after retirement, about 7, you're going to have to help me with this one, 7 or 8 years ago after he retired from FAA.
We ought to call Trina up here. You know what we ought to do? This might be a good time to call Trina up here, because she's got some history about your dad, and I want to hear the female side of the Weathers family. So if we hold for 1 second, we'll bring Trina Weathers Boyce up here and maybe take Steve's spot if we can.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
This weekend, a movie opened in America that is really unlike any other movie. A significant movie because it is about a group of gentlemen who won the Congressional Gold Medal, the Tuskegee Airmen. They were the first black airmen in the United States military history. It's part of black history, but beyond black history, it's American history. Because as I watched the movie yesterday in Memphis, in a largely African-American crowd, I realized this was a story about America's progress in fulfilling its promise, and about the problems we've had and we had to overcome. The Tuskegee Airmen were men that wanted to fight for their country in World War II. And they weren't allowed to because of segregationist policies that we had at the time. The military wasn't integrated, and they didn't think African Americans were capable of serving as pilots and weren't allowed to do so. So they had an experimental group set up in Tuskegee, Alabama, at Tuskegee Institute to train black Army personnel who wanted to be pilots. They succeeded, and they formed the Tuskegee Airmen. They had many obstacles, but they beat the odds, and they succeeded. They rose to the challenge. They dispelled myths that African Americans weren't courageous enough, weren't skilled enough, weren't smart enough. On Friday, at the request of the family, I spoke at the funeral of Lieutenant Colonel Luke Weathers, Jr. Lieutenant Colonel Weathers was from Memphis originally, died in Tucson, Arizona at age 90. He was one of the first Tuskegee Airmen. Lieutenant Colonel Weathers not only had to fight the Germans and fight for his country, he had to fight his country to be able to accept and benefit in the basic rights that we all take for granted. Well, we've been joined by the most beautiful part of the Weathers family.
Thank you.
Trina and Trina Weathers Boyce. And we were talking about your dad and some of his accomplishments. Did he talk to you ever about his accomplishments or the prejudice that he faced going into the military and the opportunity, even in the FAA?
Well, when I was little and I started inquiring about who this great man was, because I just didn't understand why everybody always wanted to take a picture with Mr. Weathers or wanted his autograph. And my mother was an educator, and so she started telling me about Tuskegee, that your daddy was a pilot. He flew in World War II, and you know, then I started asking questions. And he used to say, oh, it wasn't anything. I did that in World War II. And as I got older and began to have social studies and history and would read, it wasn't there. And that confused me. And I was like, how could he have done this in World War II and it's not printed? I don't get, you know, it's not in the history books. And so then my mother started talking to me a little bit more about Tuskegee and sharing, and I started inquiring actually and investigating on my own to see some of the things that the Tuskegee Airmen had done.
Well, you know, it's interesting you mention that, because this show was going on and going to be on during Black History Month. Mm-hmm. And some people don't understand why there should be Black History Month. But there's so much Black history that was never recorded, right, because textbooks pick and choose what they want. Right. In Texas, yes, they got this really strange right-wing crowd that want to rewrite history. And in Tennessee, we've got some of those same type people in the Tea Party that want our textbooks now to delete any references to say that the Founding Fathers ever owned slaves.
Yeah.
I mean, so they never wrote about black historical figures, and now they don't even want to say that the Founding Fathers owned slaves. I mean, you know, so history is kind of, as the historian, the revisionist history can come about, and we need to have the truth. So it's great that we learned about what the Tuskegee Airmen did, and much of it's been more recent that it's really come to the public's attention because of the Congressional Gold Medal, and now this movie. What did you feel like when you saw the movie? It must have been great pride for you.
Oh, yeah. I actually got a chance to see the movie in December sometimes, when Momentum Productions was privy to get it from George Lucas. Actually, Randy Wade and I looked at it together. And I actually cried after it was over because it was so surreal, in as much as, you know, I get a chance to see in real life what my father had actually accomplished.
For me, I liked it. It was action-packed, and of course you got to have something marketable to the public in order for it to sell and be successful. I was looking personally, and maybe I'm getting a little bit too deep, on how they actually got into the program and what happened to the Tuskegee Airmen after it was all over with. At least something written on the screen, you know, this is what they endured, like they do in some text. That's what I was looking for, but I enjoyed the movie, and I liked it. And it was good. It was good.
But I understand there's other sequels to it. George Lucas, of course, used his own money to produce the movie. In the early 90s, I can remember my father saying he was working on George Lucas with this Tuskegee movie. And I was like, okay, yeah. and actually found some printed information where he had met with the Tuskegee Airmen. My father has an article, I have a lot of his articles that he's kept over the years, and actually in '93, if I'm not mistaken, that it was an article published where George Lucas had met with this group to start doing working on the movie and actually confirming some of the research that he had done.
Now, one thing I wish they'd have had in the movie, and you know, Steve Cash was talking about the history, is your dad named his plane the Spirit of Beale Street?
It is.
Yes.
That was pretty cool, and that wasn't. They should have had that in the movie, I think. Yeah. And then your father had something, I can't place it exactly. Andre, you work with Pinnacle Airlines, you might know this. Didn't he do something with the plane and Pinnacle Airlines to promote the plane or the name of the plane for some charitable?
Right. Well, my sister, she worked out there before me. And when she got me on out there, they were looking at the roster and they saw a Weathers name. So they already knew my sister, but they didn't know me by my face. So one day, they had got in touch with me and they said that Phil Reed and Phil Teneri wanted to speak to me. And I was wondering, I said, what did I do?
I'd have thought the same thing.
You know, so you know, they saw the Weathers name, so they wanted to put my name with my face. So they found out that I was Luke Weathers' son, and we were coming around to, he purchased the 100th CRJ for Pinnacle Airlines, and they wanted my father to unveil it. And on the side of the plane, it read, the Spirit of Beale Street. And I can't recall what date it was, but he flew to Memphis. They flew him to Memphis. He unveiled the plane at the hangar over there at Wilson Airfield, and that's how the Spirit of Beale Street.
So that name was attached to a Pinnacle plane that's a regular passenger plane.
Right.
I see.
Right.
Let me add to that. I don't know if his plane was actually named the Spirit of Beale Street. The Pinnacle they were honoring the Afro-Americans at the time who raised over $300,000, and they awarded the Spirit of Beale Street name to a bomber. Dad was the one who spearheaded the fundraising for that bomber. Now, I don't know if his particular plane was named the Spirit of Beale Street, but there was another bomber associated with Memphis other than the Memphis Belle.
Right.
And that's what Pinnacle, the president, and I don't know his name, of Pinnacle Airlines, discovered this.
It was Phil Trenary at the time.
Yes, and he, in honor of what transpired back in those days and to honor the Afro-American Memphians here, they wanted to name the Spirit of Beale Street, and consequently, since my father was the one who spearheaded this campaign, and this back then was their contribution to the war effort, they brought him in for the unveiling.
And where did the $300,000 go to that was raised for charity? Was it $300,000 raised for charity?
No, the $300,000 was given to the Army Air Corps at the time to build the bomber. And they named that bomber the Spirit of Beale Street.
I got you.
Yeah.
I got you. Trina, tell me I don't know who was really spearheaded the buses that went to Arlington for the funeral, but somebody in the family did a great job, and there were like, was it 4 buses of folks that came up there?
Actually two vans, 2 15-passenger vans. It was broken down at the very end because a lot of people who wanted to go, it was after Christmas, and who wanted to go couldn't get off. Miss Thomas, being one in your office, she really wanted to come, and she had helped me tremendously to get things together on this end, to coordinate it with DC. Your DC office was great. But after my church members wanted to go, Modine Thompson and some of the older church members that we have left at St. Teresa who were there in the 60s, in the late 60s, doing integration, had expressed that they wanted to go. So I thought getting a big bus to make them comfortable would be, for the ride at their ages. And after we lost Deacon Ferrante after my father passed, which was one of our deacons at our church. And Modine's real close to Little Flower, so she guess she felt like she needed to stay close to Father and kind of help him around the church since Deacon Ferrante was no longer with us. And so we ended up just really doing the two 15-passenger vans, which worked out even better.
It was a very beautiful service and a nice group of people that came up. After the service, and the service was seven horses, 6 attached to the caisson that carried your dad. And then the 7th horse was the kind of a guide horse, I think they call it, not attached. And the band was out there and played, flugelhorn player or bugler played taps at the end, and there's a 21-gun salute. And the military has such a way of conducting a service to where it's.
Don't forget the flyover.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
the flyover was
that was a lot of hard work and a lot of contacts made to get that done.
4 planes and the plane kind of going off to itself.
Missing man.
Yeah, that was a beautiful part. And I'm so happy. When it first happened, I was at the gravesite and we were afraid, oh my God, but y'all got to see it because y'all were coming after the caisson a little bit of ways away. Yeah, it was a beautiful service.
Thank you.
Yeah.
After the service, we retired to the Women's Military Museum, and there was a reception, and there were several Tuskegee Airmen there.
Yes.
Did they know your dad, and did you learn anything there about their experiences?
So glad to see Charles McGee. I haven't seen him since I was a little girl, probably 12 or 13 years old. He's a very good friend of my father's. Earlier you were talking, but my daddy was president of the East Coast chapter of Tuskegee Airmen after he retired from FAA and was very active then. And Charles McGee has always been right there by him. Lee Archer, another friend who has also passed away. I was fortunate enough to get one of his programs after he died. It was sent to me. But he's had a lot of friends to stick with him through Tuskegee all along the way. Of course, Benjamin O. Davis, they always kept in contact, even after Tuskegee up until he passed away. And the Arizona chapter is pretty strong with a lot of older heads too. So he enjoyed that chapter out there too.
Andre, have any of y'all been to Arlington before?
Yes, I used to live in D.C.
Oh, so you visited?
Yeah.
My first time.
Well, I used to work in the dietary over there at the base, and I used to feed the military.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Had you been there before?
I had. My father made sure, as we were little, he's taken my boys, my older boys, to see every landmark. The only thing that I had not seen was the Martin Luther King Monument, and I was glad to get a chance to see that when I was there.
You know, Luke, it was your first experience. I had a couple of my staff were there, and they had not been. It shocked me. My research, my legislative director and my transportation, and they'd been in Washington for a while. They'd never been to Arlington, so I took them afterwards to go to see the Kennedy graves, and we drove around a little bit. I've spent a lot of time there walking around. It's a tribute to the. It is sacred and holy ground, and it was a proper repository for your father's last home, and it's where he belonged. Yeah, and so
that was his wish, and I told him, after it happened and we started looking into it and we called and found out all this information, I was like, okay, this is going to take an act of Congress. And literally, it took an act of Congress. So we appreciate that very much.
Well, my office was honored to help. Your father did the work, and it was an appropriate place for him to be. And then as we speak, and we're about to close out, on February the 23rd, we're going to have a plaque. That'll be the first plaque to an African-American gentleman at the airports in their history to commemorate your father's life, which the Federal Aviation Administration has worked with y'all and my office to memorialize your father's efforts, not only as a Tuskegee Airman, but with the FAA and in other areas as a civil rights hero and leader. And the acting director of the FAA will be coming to Memphis to participate in a service which we think will be a highlight of Black History Month when folks can understand and appreciate it. And forever, your father's memory will be in Memphis at the Terminal A. I guess it'll be the northwest corners where they got the plaques. And I went over and looked at them one day, and I read it, and I thought, this is where Colonel Weathers ought to be. So we're going to get that done on the 23rd of February.
Thank you so much. I got an email from your office, and The reading is wonderful. I think it's excellent. I kind of, was so close to, after the burial when I got back in, and that was one of the first things that I opened in my email, and I was like, wow, this is awesome.
Well, your father was a great man. He's got a great family. I know he was all proud of y'all. 5 children, 12 grandchildren, and 10 great-grandchildren. And all 3 generations were there. America was lucky that he came and that he did his duty, and he didn't let the prejudices of the time impede him from being somebody who protected our country and our bombers from the Germans and kept our way of life. So I think he is just super heroic. He had to fight his country for his rights and then fight Germany to keep his and everybody else's rights. So thank y'all.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome. This has been Congressional Report with the Weathers family, the Tuskegee Airmen. See the movie, remember the man, and remember the lesson it teaches. We all need to work together, give everybody opportunity, and not have prejudice and discrimination as part of America. This is Steve Cohen, and this has been Congressional Report. Hi, I'm Steve Cohen, and this is Congressional Report. It's kind of a flashback to when it used to be Legislative Report, because we've got 3 special guests, 3 powerhouses in the Tennessee General Assembly who just happen to be women. On my left, my successor with Shea Flynn as an interim member, Senator Beverly Marrero, Senate District 30. And on her left, Representative Karen Camper, who represents the Whitehaven area, and the way the districts are, I don't know where else it goes, and we'll talk about that.
Yes, sir.
It's a strong member of the House. And then Johnnie Turner, who is a representative succeeding her husband, Larry Turner, who was legendary for his courageous stands in the General Assembly, and the former head of the NAACP here in Memphis. Welcome all of you back to Congressional Report.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Proud to be here.
Now, Congress districts are created by the legislature. That's where redistricting takes place.
That's correct.
The Republicans pretty much did it, but y'all voted on it. You tried some amendments. The Republicans had it pretty much to themselves, didn't they?
We just really didn't have any, we were so outnumbered. I voted against all 3 of the redistricting plans.
And that was Congress, the Senate, and the House.
Congress, the Senate, and the House. I thought they were all really, unfortunately, very slanted towards one political party. I thought it was extremely unfair that we had not had any opportunity to have any input or any foresight for what they were planning to do. And actually, the first time I saw the plans for the Senate, the House, and Congress was when I was sitting in Judiciary Committee, and they came in with a map, and that was the very first time, and I was expected to vote that day for it to come through Judiciary. And of course I voted against it, but the Judiciary Committee in the Senate has 9 members. All committees in the Senate have 9 members, but there are 6 Republicans and 3 Democrats. So no matter what, we have no chance of stopping anything.
Was every vote in the Senate, and I saw some of the Senate online, was every vote party line? Did the Republicans all stay together?
Well, mostly they stayed together. Now, I think on the Senate districts, there were 2 Republicans that voted along with most of the Democrats. There were a few Democrats that didn't stay with us on the vote.
There was one Republican who had his seat taken from him, didn't he?
Yeah, Senator Roberts had his seat, he was drawn out of his seat. His district disappeared, and he voted with us. And apparently Senator May Beavers was not happy with the way they had configured her district, and she voted initially. Now, there was a problem that they were in such a hurry to get this done and ram it through the House and the Senate that they left out Tipton County, so they had to come back. They left out one whole county in Tennessee, so they came back and the next week and had to vote on it again, and I think the vote changed a little bit then.
The bottom line is this, I guess, and what the people watching the show want to mostly know. In your Senate district, which was my Senate district, it used to go from the Midtown with a street that was a natural western border At one time it was the interstate, and then another time it moved up to Willette, and it moved as different districting opportunities came. And then it extended out to I-240, and it was pretty easy for people to know if they were inside I-240 and they were inside of Sam Cooper or Summer and then inside Lamar, that spine, they were in your district. Now hardly anybody of those people are in your district, and you have your home area of Evergreen.
And
that's about it, isn't it?
That's pretty much in my Senate District 30, although I have a group of people that have been put into District 30 that were in my House district.
That's right, that goes
which
out.
is Valentine, that area, and that area that goes out north of Summer. That was also in District 89, and District 89, of course, was totally eliminated in the redistricting. It moved over to Knox County.
Yeah, but your district went out Berkeley, and then your district now it was changed, and it was changed on the last day. I think what used to go out to I-240 now goes to Tillman. Right. That's a big change.
That was a big change. That's exactly right. That's right. They took away all of East Memphis. They took away
Memphis State,
University of Memphis, which
that too.
I was very proud to represent. They took away Chickasaw Gardens. They took away Central Gardens. They took away a lot of my friends who've been great help to me and support for me. So.
And the bottom line is, you're in a district now. Your Senate District 30 has your number, but it includes the home of Senator Jim Kyle, who otherwise would have been drawn out. So the two of y'all are in the same district, is that correct?
We're actually in the same district at this point in time, right.
And in the House, I know there was some discussion on the fact that they could have created additional African American seats, and there was a proposal to do so, but they didn't do it. What kind of came down in the House on the voting, and what was the
Well, basically, as Senator Marrero has indicated, that the proposals that we had, and that one that would allow for an additional African American, was voted down by the Republicans. Each of the bills that we have, the only recourse we have at this point is the courts. And we're hoping, that's why it's not over until it's over. Even though Senator Marrero was talking about the numbers in the Senate. Well, in the House, of the 99 members, we have 64 that are Republican and 34 that are Democrats and 1 independent. So, and they vote lockstep. There were some deviations in the Senate, but our votes were straight down the line. In fact, someone was absent, so when the board, it was 63-33, 63-33, 60, all the way down. Nobody deviated. Even with the valid arguments, we thought our arguments were very valid because we thought it was unfair, the inequity we saw in terms of the representation, and one of the bills was a coalition bill, devised with the input of a coalition of local groups, the Peace and Justice Center, I think, the NAACP, of course, because we had numerous consultants and lawyers who thought we had a great chance with the proposal that they had because they were very familiar with the Voting Rights Act, PUSH, and I think SCLC, and a couple of other organizations that worked together to produce the districts redrawn in a more fair and equitable way. But it was shot down just like all the rest of them. And I, just as Representative Camper, we voted against each of the bills that the Republicans put forth. Well, in addition, we had a little better, I mean, I don't know if you can call it better, but at least they called us in on the House side and let us see what they had proposed. That's all you could do, but just look at it. Nothing you could do about it. They didn't even see theirs until they had to vote for it. But even with that, no changes were made. It was as it had been, and whereas when the Democrats were in the majority, I was not there, but I understand that they allowed the Republicans to have some input in terms of how their districts were drawn. So not only did we not have an input except to be shown, you know, it's like your mom or your dad telling you this is what you're going to do, no input, but there was no representation from the Democrats, there was no representation from the women, and it's other similar issues. But when it boiled down to that vote, we voted against each of the proposals that they had given, because even in those instances where some of our incumbents, or you're not supposed to draw it to the advantage of the incumbent. That's not negotiable when it becomes before the judge. But even in those instances, we were concerned about those who were not given an opportunity to put two incumbents and then stack it so that one has an advantage over the other. If they had to do it, it would have been fairer to, if you put two in, at least give each one an equal chance. But to put two in and one decidedly has a greater advantage than the other was even more discriminatory.
What it looks like, if I remember, and Karen, you can correct me, or Johnny or Beverly, is that Representative Hardaway and Representative Barbara Cooper, were they put in the same district?
They were in the same district.
And then was Representative Richardson put in a district?
Put in Antonio Parkinson's district.
Right.
So and then there were some other situations like that in Chattanooga, and maybe Ms. Favors and Dr. Brown.
And Dr. Brown in Chattanooga.
Yeah. Karen, your district's 87, isn't it?
85.
I'm 87.
85, you're 87?
Yes, sir. How's
85 different? It's still a Johnnie Charter district, isn't it?
Yes. Prior to this, I had the Westwood part of Whitehaven. In fact, if you went down Holmes Road, everything to the south was in my district. I had parts of Hickory Hill, parts of Germantown, and parts of Collierville. Now my district ends at Forest Irene. And I say, when I talk to groups to get them to get a perspective of the district, I said, you can go from New Park Cemetery to West Tennessee Veterans Cemetery, and everything in between almost is mine. So some of the districts in the Collierville and Germantown area, where many of my friends had moved, have now been given to the Republican Party.
I see. And Karen, how's your district look?
My district takes in still a portion of Whitehaven. It used to run all the way from 3rd to Riverdale. So I've lost everything west of Elvis Presley Boulevard, but I go further south now to Holmes. And then I go all the way east to Hickory Hill. And then I swing north right there and pick up Overton High. I pick up Colonial Middle. I have all the way to Southern right there at Oak Court Mall.
The House districts are kind of unusual in that, and I may be missing some of them, but in the city, they kind of run east and west. And so they kind of a strata cut out of the city, and there's not necessarily neighborhood integrity where one person's got Whitehaven and one person's got South Memphis or North. It's all kind of, it's a strip.
We share in some of the communities. We share about 3 or 4 different communities. So we may have Whitehaven, Parkway Village, Fox Meadows, and Hickory Hill. It's about 3 of us that share in those different districts.
Now you're an attorney.
I am not an attorney.
You're not an attorney? You're in the military, though.
I was in the military.
Former military.
I retired Army. No.
I thought you were in the military.
No, I just wanted to be.
You're on Judiciary Committee, though.
I know when I came and the speaker asked me, where do you want to serve? That was one of my top 3, and I was fortunate enough to get it. At the time, nobody from West Tennessee, I believe, at least in the House, was even on Judiciary, so that might contribute to why I got it.
Now, you mentioned that, I think Johnny mentioned the breakup of Democrats, Republicans, Independents. The Independent is Williams, and he's a guy from East Tennessee who, was he a freshman or a second term guy? Second term, he cast a vote with the Democrats to become the Speaker.
He did.
And what was that, 1 term or 2?
It was.
1 term. And so for 1 term, he was king of the hill.
He was.
He took his card and he played it, and he was king of the hill. Now that the Republicans have got it back, where is he?
He fared relatively okay. I think he lost a lot of his home county, I should say. But I think the area itself is still primarily Republicans, and he Like you say, he's in a Carter County Republican.
Yes.
They took a lot of Carter County from him.
And now the last General Assembly, he was also, that's when Beth Halterman Harwell came in, right?
Correct.
So how was he treated after being King of the Hill? Was he kind of put in the back row to some extent?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
To some extent.
You play that card, if you win, you're shooting the moon.
Yeah.
Yes, but he played his card well. The 2
Well,
years
he voted for himself,
Yeah.
you know, and he'll forever be
I
in
happened
history.
to be there. Larry was the legislator at that time, but I always we take an entourage up to see him being sworn in each time, because each election is very important we think each one deserves whatever. But anyway, I was there, and Larry was Deputy Speaker of the House, which meant he had the inside info, but he wouldn't tell me. I said, what's going to happen? You know what? He wouldn't tell me. I said, I can't tell you. And I was sitting on the floor, and I saw some of the legislators being told something, and their faces just, I mean, it was like the look on their faces was unexplainable. And I said, something is not going right, because I understand that some of the opposed our party had pledged, you know how politics is. But when they were told this, and I can imagine it was, every Democrat is going to vote for Kent Williams. And the suspense was intensified because Williams is the last name on the board.
Wow.
Can you imagine? And when they said every Democrat voted Kent Williams, and you get down to this moment, and he said Kent Williams, I mean, that house broke up. They called him names. Oh, I thought they were going to have to bring in the security guards to protect him. But not one time did he lose his cool. He didn't lose his cool the 2 years he was up there.
True.
And I thought I was new to it, but I thought he did a good job.
I think he did okay.
I think he did a great job. I mean, considering the situation, and I was really impressed because I had heard rumblings that things were going on, and so I had left the Senate and was coming over, and I stood in the floor at the House when the thing was going down.
Oh, you did?
So it was so exciting because I knew that there was a coup, and but I also knew that a lot of people didn't know. But Jason Munpower had basically already planned his celebration party.
But they were there. His hometown news, his whole family.
He'd brought in all of his family and friends. He had bought all the flags that flew over the Capitol for that day.
Well, that was 4 years ago, and it was an historic moment, but we want to talk about this year.
Okay.
And this year, the Republicans had it all in control, and does it look like they're going to give Democrats any opportunity to participate in passing bills, or is it pretty much going to be just a Republican agenda? What do you think, Johnnie?
Well, I think there will be some bills upon which we can have common accord. I've had a couple of Republicans to approach me, particularly on my bill, predatory lenders, as it relates to auto title lenders. And they are saying it's unfair that our people their automobile is taken from them, the interest rate is so high, and the fees accrue. And he said, let's work together to see how together we can come up with a bill that will pass both parties. And so that's where we are on that. I had another Republican to approach me. Each year I present, Larry did it, and we've always felt very strongly about taking away the rights of ex-felons who served their time and done paid restitution, etc. But yet they could not vote because of child support. And that really is unfair, because how are you going to pay child support if you're incarcerated? So he was that was the aspect. He said it's just not right. And he tried to support me last year. Of course, it lost big time. But I'm hoping he'll work with me again. We've made some revisions.
Who is he?
Well, we just leave that one alone right now. Okay. I don't want to scare them away.
All right, but it's a Republican who's interested in
Oh, it's a Republican.
Because that was a bill Larry and I worked. I was the Senate and Larry was in the House. We passed that bill together.
Yeah, I don't want it to get out there so somebody can talk him out of it. See, I've got to have some strategy too.
I got you.
And that's really, really how we're going to have to do it. It's similar to what you do in D.C. Yeah. You have to find bills. Now, there are some bills, I am going to present them as if there are bills that I feel that impact African Americans and other minorities or the poor disproportionately. I'm going to present them, fight for them, if I'm the only one standing. But there are some other issues that I think we can find some common ground. And perhaps, well, we were pretty, Representative Camper does an outstanding job in the legislature. I just admire her and compliment her because her military experience makes her a very valuable member of the legislature. She's highly respected. She knows the budget. You can ask about the budget, ain't all right, but I'm just telling the truth. But what I'm saying is, I'm saying that to say that many of the bills that she sponsors, several of them, they get bipartisan support.
Yeah. Is there any chance that there'll be any cleaning up of the voter ID bill? That was one of the most heinous bills passed last year.
I don't personally think so. I think they're going to stick to their guns. They're going to be bills that people are going to.
When you say stick to their guns, are you going to have a gun to vote?
No, you have to have a valid handgun permit, and you can use that as an ID to vote. You don't have to have it.
I believe that. I mean, they really believe that this was something they should have done, and to back off from it now, I just don't see it happening. There will be some bills that try to repeal it and these kinds of things. I don't think that any of them are going to pass.
I don't think it'll happen either, but I think there are people that are really thinking about taking this to court. And I think that that's our best chance, is actually in a court fight.
Well, there's several bills that are going to be presented, and we know almost from the beginning that any hope of passage is slim to none. And not only are we going to try to reverse the voter ID requirement, which is another form of poll tax and disproportionately impacts the elderly, our young people, our college-age persons, and
African Americans and
African Americans particularly.
Yeah, they don't believe
but we're also going to work against the anti-union bill that they have against our teachers. We're also going to work to have a delay before the implementation of the new teacher evaluation program that's being proposed, that no one has. You're making it as you go. We're saying, we'll give you a year or more to revise it, to have teacher input, so that that will be fair to the teachers. In its current form, it's not fair to the teachers, and it overworks the principals. They can't run the school because they're so busy trying to implement with this.
Let me talk to you about education a little bit. One of the proposals we've read about has been the opportunity, this has been on for 20 years, I think, University of Memphis to have its own board. Do you think this could happen this year, and that might be something people would work on together?
I do think that talking to the people at the University of Memphis, that they are in talks with people, and they're hoping that they will be able to get some sort of affirmation from the governor. It would really take the governor talking to the Board of Regents and having some sort of input for that to happen.
That's the problem. The Board of Regents is they don't want to give up the power, and then the other schools want to have their own board, et cetera. How about scholarships in the lottery? Where's that going to go?
Well, there was a task force that was created to look at scholarships, and there's a perception that, or belief, that because the numbers are down in terms of collecting and people playing the lottery, that we need to try to look at reducing the award amount for the lottery, changing it to where, you know, the requirements are different because they see the funding being chipped away, and over a long period of time, we may end up in a deficit.
But you know, the reality is there's enough money there in the reserves to last until 2024.
I know. But
and so
you know how they feel about the reserves in terms of the state credit worthiness and the program's ability to be viable, and they just really don't want to be planning on accessing any of the reserve dollars. So,
but there's by law, there's $50 million in reserve That's by law. There's about $200 and something million that's in reserve just because it wasn't spent.
Right.
That's money supposed to be for scholarships. That money's not supposed to be a reserve. And the danger you've got is that if you don't keep the scholarships to where that money's used for scholarships, somebody's going to get a hold of it like Senator Norris did when he took 90-something million and put it into the quote-unquote
the school energy efficiency.
Excess for energy, right.
Yeah,
And that was just earmarks.
I know.
Earmarks for legislators to go out and go, here's something I did. They stole the money from kids going to college.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
I agree with you.
So that's the danger. And I've talked to Governor Haslam about it, and he's kind of gotten on that mantra about, well, we don't want to have to worry about this in 2024. That seems crazy. You know, the money's there. The kids ought to get. This is when they need to have it. And I've got to say, Senator Kyle's been right on that issue. The kids now are college scholarships, tuition's going up.
Yeah.
This is not the time to lessen scholarships in a recession. You get more kids want to go to school than they need to go.
Yeah, we'll be fighting it. We'll be fighting for that. But you know, it's hard to determine what the outcome will be based on the dynamics we have
on a positive note, I would like to say that I do have a couple of bills. I have a few bills that I worked with Representative Coley.
Yes.
Yeah, you're a big fan of Jim's.
I'm a big fan of Jim Coley because he has been really trying to work across the aisle.
Yes.
He knows I have always been involved with issues to do with women and children. And so he brought me...
And he used to be a Democrat, so he's got a good foundation.
He brought me bills last year. He and I worked together on trafficking, and we worked with he and I worked with the TBI.
Now you have to be clear on trafficking. Trafficking of women.
Human trafficking.
Human trafficking.
I signed down to that bill as well.
Yeah. That's right. Sure. And it's been a great, it has been actually a program I think that has been very effective. The TBI worked with us. We were able to implement a hotline for people, for victims to be able to call in. We have 2 or 3 new bills that will go in this year that go a little bit further. And I was contacted by the TBI just the other day saying that they had another bill that they wanted to do to strengthen the laws against pimps and the trafficking thing. So I think that it's very important for us not to have our young girls be victims.
Yes.
We're about to run out of time. I just thought of a bill somebody ought to introduce here.
And it is.
Okay.
One of the bills I was proud of back when I was a senator was creating a toll-free line to call Nashville, 1-800-449-8366. Shelby Reinhart was against the bill. He said, we don't want them calling up here. What an attitude he had, the late Shelby Reinhart. But yeah, I just thought about it. When I passed it, it was kind of a big deal because back then you had to pick up the phone and call long distance. Now everybody's got a cell phone. Correct. It doesn't cost anything. Right. You ought to find out how much the state pays for that 1-800 line. It may not be worth it. You might save a lot of money. They're probably paying for a line that has no use anymore.
That's true.
So repeal the Cohen free call bill maybe. Thank you all for serving.
You're welcome.
Thank you for being here.
It.
You give up a lot. I know I did it for 24 years. It's a lot of moving back and forth to Nashville, leaving your family, leaving your pets.
1 second? Do we have a few seconds? I want to put a plug in for something
quick.
Very quick. We stood up the Veterans Caucus this year. We have about 23 members in both House and Senate of veterans so that we can be forward thinking on returning veterans and these kinds of things. And we stood up the Women's Caucus last year to focus in on women's issues. So we're really excited about that. And it's a joint caucus, both of them. So I just want to put that out there.
Thank you. Representative Johnnie Turner, Representative Karen Camper, Senator Beverly Marrero, thank you for your service. Thank you for being on the show. Good luck in your fight. You don't have to be battling. You have to be Larry, to be that voice in the wilderness. This is Congressman Steve Cohen. It's been an honor to have my former colleagues from the General Assembly with us today. Thank you for watching Congressional Report.